Hello everyone, and welcome back to the SNES in chronological order, the series where I'm constantly playing games you've never heard of and trying to figure out if any of them are worth playing in 2022. The last episode had a lot of obscure games, and this one definitely does too, but April's gonna have a lot of heavy hitters. Alas, those games aren't what this video is about, as we are currently in March 1992. So let's get started with the most well-known game from this list, from what I can tell, Lemmings. Lemmings is another PC port for the Super Nintendo and has all the weird trappings that entails. Although I'm not exactly sure how accurate that is with this game. I don't know what the keyboard and mouse controls of this game would be, to be honest. I guess I'll explain Lemmings if you've never played it before. The way Lemmings works is it takes that horrible animal abuse movie Disney made, where Disney fabricated footage of rodents called lemmings mindlessly running off of a cliff, and creates digital beings that only walk forward unless they are told otherwise, to mimic the rodent-inspired myth. With a limited number of commands that you have access to, you must prevent these lemmings from typically falling to their death or meeting some other demise, and get them into the exit of the stage. I will admit, I'm not the biggest fan of puzzle games, but this one's alright. I don't love how quickly I have to assess the situation in a level I've never seen before, but other than that, I find the levels I played pretty enjoyable. Figuring out all the different ways to try to use the Lemmings command to accomplish whatever goals you need to achieve is a pretty fun premise for the game, barring the fact that I hate how when you have a bunch of Lemmings in one area, and the direction they are facing matters for the command you want to give, you kind of just have to cross your fingers and hope you hit a lemming moving in the right direction before you run out of commands to finish the level. The game gives you a password after every level, so you never really lose any progress. There's also no lives or continue system. You either finish a stage or you don't finish the stage. The cursor moves a bit too slow for my taste, and you kind of need to think a few moves ahead so you have the cursor in the right place at the right time, even after you know what you need to do to solve a puzzle. I think this game's good, but one of the first Flash games I remember playing was a Lemmings clone, so you've either probably played something like this before or won't find this game very compelling. One of the better games I played for this series lately, which I guess isn't saying much now that I'm reading it out loud. I think the most interesting thing I can say about PGA Tour Golf is that it has no guide or any information on game facts, and I could not find a copy of the game manual anywhere. Also, it's another EA Sports game without the EA Sports guy, so we're 2 for 2 in that front. It's a pretty standard early golf game, but separates itself from the other golf games we've talked about so far in a couple of ways. It's pretty easy to jump into a single round of golf or a tournament. There's even practice for shot types and single holes, which is actually not something I had seen as of yet from my recollection. But still no front or back nine choice from what I can tell. I know I harp on that a lot, and I guess I'll just mention here, I like just playing 9 holes of golf just to try to figure out how to play a golf game. You know, because lots of golf games have their own weird little mechanics, and being able to just play 9 holes is a lot better than having to commit to playing 18. There's even 4 courses to choose from, but 18 holes took me pretty much my whole hour of playing. And it even seems like there's some kind of system to save in the middle of a round, but I didn't test that out, so I don't know if it's a battery save or a password. At the beginning of each hole, the game gives you some advice for how to approach the hole from people who I assume were once famous golfers, but I've never heard of any of them. The game controls fairly traditionally for a golf game, although it's less obvious to me if I could apply topspin or backspin to a ball with a shot, and I don't have a manual or game facts guide to read to figure out if I can. The shot mechanics feel fine, but putting is annoying. I actually like the putting screen they give you when you're on the green, but sometimes it pops up when you aren't on the green, just like close to the green, and it's a little less useful then, but it's a perfectly serviceable golf game. Having 4 courses is 4 times more than the other golf games we've talked about in this series. It's probably the best one out of what we've seen so far, but still suffers from being a 30-year-old golf game. I'm going to let Pit Fighter speak for itself. It looks like this. It sounds like this. Yes, it controls the way it looks. The Ultra game we talked about in the second episode of this series is a better fighting game than this. Paperboy 2 is a better video game than this. Let's move on. Smart Ball is a character platformer that is kind of puzzle-ish and has a pretty decent mix of exploration. This game appears to be called Jerry Boy in Japan, which I'm only mentioning because every time I think about it being called Jerry Boy, it reminds me of Jerry Beans Man. But this is not a game starring Jerry Beans Man. You are a ball of slime. You can glide along the floor, jump, duck, pick up balls to throw as a weapon, stick to a wall. All the things you'd expect a slime to do. It took me a while to figure out you can jump on top of enemies a la Doki Doki Panic and duck on them to defeat them, because the collision of when you're actually above an enemy is very questionable. There are various signposts in each level that spell out Jerry that act as checkpoints in the level, and in later levels these signs end up being a little bit hidden, which is an interesting way of rewarding exploring in these levels. And I find this reward-based checkpoint system to be pretty good game design. I don't think this game is bad, but I'd put it in the same category as something like Joe and Mac, an old character platformer that plays mostly fine, but has some weird physics and hitboxes that makes it less fun to play than the average modern character platformer. I might enjoy this game more if I wasn't sitting here wishing I was playing ActRaiser or Super Castlevania 4 right now instead of reading off this script about Smart Ball. You can check it out if you want, but I don't think there's anything here you haven't seen before. This is WWF Super Wrestlemania, a somewhat bare-bones wrestling game published by LJN, which if you've watched any angry video game nerd, you will know well. There's a reasonable number of recognizable 90s wrestlers in this game, but the game feels quite stiff to control, not very fluid. Definitely old school fighting game controls. People haven't learned anything from Street Fighter 2 on a console yet. These graphics look alright, but I found the sound kind of annoying, and I don't always know what my button presses are actually doing, even after reading a manual that tells me what my button presses are supposed to be doing. I don't know if what I read was inaccurate or what. It just didn't feel like the game was doing what it said it would do when I pressed the buttons. I think in early wrestling game design, even up to the Nintendo 64 wrestling games, game designers really wanted hits to feel like they had weight to them, and they wanted you to feel like you were really controlling a big, bulky dude, which I get the concept of, but the execution has never felt right to me, and this game is no exception. It might be fun to play this game with a friend, but the basic AI fights aren't enough for me to want to recommend this game to you. I'd say probably look somewhere else for a wrestling game. I realize I keep saying this at the end of games, and I think maybe it should just be implied for any early Super Nintendo game that I play where I'm not immediately praising it, but that feels a little bit reductive. I don't know. What do y'all think? Let me know in the comments. This is The Addams Family, a licensed character platformer. It sucks. This is in that weird cartoon art style that I really don't like, and the sprite quality difference is incredibly jarring from sprite to sprite. You play as something they want you to think is Gomez Addams, and supposedly you have to rescue the rest of your family. There are other mechanics in this game. You find a hat that you can fly around with, you pick up weapons that give you an extra hit and let you deal with enemies in a different way than jumping on them, but boy, does this game have the bare minimum of what I would call game design to it. The levels feel like they were thrown together in a Mario Maker tutorial. The enemy designs make no sense. The environment designs make no sense. I do not understand who this game is supposed to be for. I watched an Addams Family cartoon growing up, and I know it looked nothing like this. I watched Addams Family movies growing up, and they looked nothing like this. This game feels like it was just made to say they made a video game. As such, you should stay far away from it. It isn't the worst game I've ever played, but I've played a bunch of games, so that doesn't really mean much. Extra Innings is a baseball game on the Super Nintendo. It looks and controls almost identically to every other Super Nintendo baseball game I have talked about in this series. When you lose a game because it's called early because you're 10 runs behind, this anime girl looks at you with a disappointed face. I wish I had anything else interesting to say at this point that wasn't there are way too many early baseball games for the Super Nintendo. Well, that was a pretty weird month. I actually have a question for you if you made it this far in the video. Do any of these games actually look worth playing to you? And if so, why? I'm just amazed at some of these games. I'm aware that these games are coming out while NES games are still being made. For example, the later Mega Man games on the NES are not out. As of writing for this, 4, 5, and 6 are not out yet. But it's surprising to see how long it seems like it's taking developers to really figure the Super Nintendo out. I think it might be because I'm playing every released game, though, in very quick succession. Anyways, the next episode is going to be wild, because we're going to be talking about Contra 3, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and Top Gear, all in the same episode because they all came out in the same month. And I'm super excited to play this game. So if you like this video, I hope you'll hit the like button and subscribe to see when that video comes out if it hasn't by the time you're watching this. I've got a playlist with every episode in this series if this is your first time watching, so you can see everything I've talked about so far. I'll see you next time. Have a good day.